Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Israel's defense minister approves a plan to take over Gaza City and authorizes the call-up of 60,000 reservists as negotiators scramble to secure a ceasefire to end 22 months of fighting with Hamas. Russia says it has captured 3 villages in eastern Ukraine, claiming fresh territorial gains despite US-led peace efforts and a flurry of diplomacy to end the conflict. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visits Afghanistan after India to attend a trilateral meeting with his Afghan and Pakistani counterparts. Uganda denies reports of an agreement with the United States to take in illegal immigrants amid US efforts to secure deals with countries willing to accept deported migrants who are not their citizens. And over 20 more people have died in a torrential spell of monsoon rain in Pakistan, where downpours have swept away entire villages over the past week, pushing the overall death toll beyond 400. Hello and welcome. We start with Donald Trump's tariff blitz that came with one motive: to make America great again. We don't know how close he is to that goal, but his policies are certainly reshaping global dynamics, with new alliances being formed, the existing ones being strengthened, and in some cases even rivals coming together. Old partners and BRICS buddies, India and South Africa, both have been hit hard by Trump's tariffs. South Africa faces a 30% duty, the highest in Africa, and India faces 50%, the highest in the world. So naturally, the two are now looking to deepen their economic ties. A South African trade delegation is set to arrive in India next week. It will be led by Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau, at the invitation of India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. The South African minister will address the 20th India-Africa conclave. The objective is clear: deepen trade links and explore new markets. Trump's 30% tariff poses a deep threat to South Africa's economy. It cuts access to a key market and puts tens of thousands of jobs at risk. So Pretoria says finding alternative trade partners is crucial. And India is an attractive option. South African officials have emphasized that India can ease the US tariff saga. Indian businesses, too, are keen on expanding investments in South Africa. India is currently South Africa's 4th largest trading partner and also its 4th largest consumer market. Indian firms have invested over $1.3 billion in South Africa since the year 2000 in sectors ranging from pharma, IT, automotive, banking and mining. More than 150 Indian companies already operate in the country. With India reportedly set to become the world's 2nd largest consumer market by 2030, the potential for trade growth is immense. The South African delegation will focus on mining, manufacturing, automotive and pharmaceuticals. Also on the agenda is energy cooperation, agriculture, and tourism partnerships. Both India and South Africa have drawn Trump's ire. For South Africa, he criticized its domestic policies as anti-white minority and targeted its foreign policy stand. For India, he imposed heavy duties over oil imports from Russia during the Ukraine war. Yet both nations stand firm on an independent foreign policy. As leading voices of the global South, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Cyril Ramaphosa have repeatedly stressed this approach on global platforms. Trump's tariffs have not only brought India and South Africa closer, but even pushed India and China to reset relations. China's foreign minister was in New Delhi yesterday. He met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, calling India a partner, not a rival. India's External Affairs Minister is now in Moscow for a 3-day visit. Meanwhile, Russian President Putin has held phone talks with both Prime Minister Modi and President Ramaphosa, keeping them updated on Ukraine peace discussions. So, whether economic or political, BRICS nations are banking on each other in tough times. Will Trump's tariffs be the turning point for the bloc? And how significant will they be for India-South Africa ties? Now, for more on this, we have with us Patrick Bond, political economist, who is joining us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you for being with us, Patrick.
It's great to be back with you, Alison. Hello.
Now, given the mounting pressure from U.S. tariffs and domestic protectionism, how significant is India as a trade partner for South Africa? And what specific sectors do you think Pretoria will prioritize during this visit?
There's a lot of trade in a few key commodities, and the question is whether we can get a bit more balance. And Parks Tau is probably as well suited as anyone to go and cut deals, but he is working under constraints, under conditions not of his own choosing. And those include the fact that some of our big industries that were exporting to the U.S., especially automobiles and steel and aluminium, are now going to have other markets. And interestingly, the big steel maker, ArcelorMittal, is owned by an Indian, Lakshmi Mittal, though it's headquartered in Luxembourg. And the dilemma for them is that they're being pounded by inexpensive Chinese imports, some say, including the Trade Administration Commission within Parks Tau's Ministry of Trade, that there's dumping, that is, selling here in South Africa from China below cost. And this just hit the steel industry, the tire industry, the washing machine, all sorts of particular sectors. Now, if the Indian market can open up, then maybe the Indian-owned South African steel industry is nearly entirely this big Indian company that used to be a state-owned company, maybe could survive. But of course, the big export from South Africa has been coal, and there's less of it going to India at the moment. And then you also have diamonds. And then from India, we're going to continue, I think, getting inexpensive pharmaceutical products in the generics, because India is the pharmacy of the third world, and we certainly have enough diseases and good historic relations, like Ramaphosa and Modi working together for an end to intellectual property on COVID vaccines, for example.
Right. And with the BRICS grouping gaining momentum and India and China also working to reset their ties, how does South Africa position itself within this evolving bloc? And what opportunities or potential risks does this present for Pretoria's economic strategy?
Well, it was 2 years ago that South Africa hosted the BRICS here in Johannesburg, and it'll be next year that India takes up BRICS hosting. And it was just 2 years ago that India hosted the G20. It was Brazil in the current, last year, in South Africa coming up in November. So these are very important moments to do exactly that collective work, because I think what Donald Trump does, as well as anyone, is divide and conquer. And what you've said is correct, that there's a backlash, and that India, China, and South Africa potentially connecting. The problem is that we still have, including Parks Tau, very strong relations with the West, and Parks Tau is doing his best to get some new oil and gas from the US, which he was bringing in. South Africa was importing from India. Even tomorrow, there are going to be protests at Parks Tau's offices in Pretoria and in Durban and in Cape Town over his failure to break the trade ties, especially coal exports, to Israel. And so these are some of the terrains in which geopolitics is terribly important. And I hope the Indians can keep up the sort of anger as the Brazilians have expressed, because South Africa is, I think, way too polite when it comes to the US.
And Minister Parks Tau, as you've mentioned, will be addressing the 20th India-Africa conclave. What message do you expect South Africa to deliver there? And how might this platform shape future India-Africa trade relations?
Well, the overarching question is whether we can improve. As I say, there's just been a decrease for the June 2025 figures that have just been released. In India-South Africa trade, substantial, about 25% declines. And so if they can improve those and also improve trade with the rest of the continent at this event, that would be marvelous. The problem is partly that when you do have some of the Indian companies that operate in South Africa, and I'm sure South African companies operating all over Africa, not being as socially responsible as they could be. We have the Guptas, for example, who are said now to be in India, and there may be an extradition treaty. We may see more complaints about big Indian companies that, for example, are ecologically destructive or engaged in corruption. And I hope the ArcelorMittal company finds a way to keep these foundries open, because currently they're all set to close, and we're just going to be getting these cheap Chinese imports, which really do no any good, because they are production below, that is, price below the cost of production. So it's a very important relationship between India and the continent, just to get the balance. And our own African Continental Free Trade agreement will probably rest upon finding more of a balance and not just being overwhelmed by the East Asian import flood that has basically decimated our industry across the continent.
Yeah. Patrick, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for your valued insights there.
Thank you very much.
And staying on with South Africa, the top minister of Ramaphosa government is under fire over racial slurs that he used in his social media posts over a decade ago. His name is Gayton McKenzie. He is the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture and the leader of the Patriotic Alliance, which is a part of President Cyril Ramaphosa's multi-party coalition government. McKenzie is a prolific tweeter. He has aggressively branded himself as a champion of the rights of black and coloured people in South Africa. But now he himself is being accused of racism. McKenzie could even potentially lose his position over racial slurs that he used more than a decade ago. But how did things get so wrong for the South African minister? Now, it all began in July of this year after McKenzie slammed a group of young black podcasters for making derogatory comments about the coloured community. In the episode, which has now been deleted, podcasters called the coloured community crazy. The clip triggered massive backlash from people, including McKenzie, and a criminal complaint was filed against the podcasters, who then later issued a public apology for the incident. Now, the podcasters learned their lesson, but the trouble had just begun for McKenzie. Right after he expressed his outrage toward the podcasters, the social media archaeologist got to work and pulled up his tweets dating back to 2013, in which McKenzie had used racist and derogatory language to describe black South Africans. In his posts from over a decade ago on X, which was then known as Twitter, McKenzie used the highly offensive K-word for black people. Now, the K-word was the most vicious racial slur used to humiliate black people during the apartheid years. It is a symbol of dehumanization and is considered highly offensive in South Africa. As the controversy blew up, the minister got into damage control mode, from posting clarifications on X to running an hour-long live on his Facebook page. He started defending himself in full force. At first, Mackenzie denied racism accusations and labeled the outrage against him as a political attack. Then he tried to justify his highly offensive language as quote-unquote descriptive and not derogatory. Mackenzie also tried to clear his image by sharing how he has been a staunch supporter for equal rights and for black and coloured people. Then finally the minister said sorry for his old comments, calling them cringe, and subjected himself to investigation. The South African Human Rights Commission is looking into the matter. Pressure is also mounting on President Cyril Ramaphosa to fire Mackenzie over the controversy. Mackenzie has described himself as a black-skinned coloured and a vocal critic of racism, but now he himself is being accused of the very thing he so aggressively opposes. Now it remains to be seen, how will President Ramaphosa react to this situation, given the fact that his party's flagship political policy has been black empowerment. And Africa is a resource-rich continent. Though the US is drifting away and former colonial rulers like France are losing grip, many foreign players are pushing to seize the opportunity and deepen ties with the continent. And one of them is Japan. The East Asian country is enhancing its influence in Africa by initiating several economic and environmental projects. In its latest move, the Japanese government has announced plans to raise $1.5 billion for impact investment in Africa, with the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and promoting sustainable growth on the continent. This comes as Japan hosted African leaders for the Tokyo International Conference on African Development. This conference was first held in 1993, and it focuses on Japanese support for development in Africa. Speaking at the conference, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has pledged Japan's support for training and development across the continent.
Just as we once did in Asia, we the people of Japan wish to laugh, cry, and break a sweat alongside the people of Africa.
Japan's growing interest in Africa reflects a larger economic trend. Experts suggest the country's recovery from 3 decades of deflation has rekindled the private sector's appetite for risk, and now they are eyeing greater access to African markets. As of yet, the US and the UK have been the main recipients of Japan's foreign direct investment, and Africa, on the other hand, has attracted only a tiny share, that is just 0.5% of Japan's total FDI to date. But now Tokyo wants to change that. Africa has caught Japan's attention for a few reasons. The continent has a rapidly expanding population, which presents a significant market opportunity, and vast deposits of natural resources. Japan is also eyeing Africa's critical minerals, base metals, and rare earths to reduce its reliance on China, which also happens to be one of Africa's top trading partners. Japan's renewed focus on boosting ties with Africa also comes at a critical time for the continent. Since returning to the White House in January, Trump's hardline trade policies have rattled African nations. Trump's tariffs have hit these countries hard, and now they are scrambling to diversify markets. Trump's crackdown on US foreign aid has also intensified the need to attract more investment into the continent. Now, China has invested heavily in Africa over the past decade. Chinese companies have signed deals worth hundreds of billions of dollars to finance shipping ports, railways, roads, and other projects under Beijing's Belt and Road Global Infrastructure Initiative. However, new lending is drying up, and these African nations are left grappling with a debt crisis. This presents an opportunity for Japan to step in and fill the investment gap in Africa, and to present itself as an alternative to China. And we end our show again on Trump's tariffs. We told you how big players across the world are coming up with a plan B to overcome the economic aftershocks of heavy export duties. But some small nations too are facing a formidable impact, and they too are drawing up strategies. Now, one of them is Lesotho, a tiny kingdom in southern Africa. It is known as the denim hub of the continent. Its economy relies heavily on textiles, contributing about 10% of GDP. And the US has long been its largest export market. But this industry now faces a serious threat. Trump has slapped a 15% tariff on Lesotho's exports. Earlier, the US threatened a 50% duty on imports, though reduced after a 3-month pause. Officials warn it is still devastating for Lesotho's economy. So the kingdom is now looking east, with Asia high on its priority list. Lesotho is actively pursuing new markets across Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, to offset collapsing US orders. Beyond Asia, Lesotho is also strengthening trade with neighbors like Botswana, Eswatini, Namibia, and South Africa. The tariff uncertainty has already triggered mass order cancellations, factory closures, and job losses. The crisis has even prompted the government to declare a state of disaster.
I now have a big problem because the money that I was making is not there anymore. I was earning between 2,900 and 3,000 rands. Now I don't have it. It's now month end, and I am just here at home, and there is no income coming in. It is all quiet.
Textiles has been the bedrock of our economy for a little while now. But hey, perhaps it's the wake-up call that we've needed for a while, that we need to diversify our economic interests, and they've come through this jolt from America. But now we should focus on upskilling and building other avenues.
Lesotho is often called Africa's jeans capital. The garment sector employs 40,000 to 45,000 workers, making it the country's largest private sector employer. It produces about 23 million pairs of jeans annually. Over 90% of these exports go to the United States. Major U.S. brands like Levi's, Wrangler, Lee, and Gap all source jeans from Lesotho. The country's denim industry has even won praise for water recycling and cleaner dyeing techniques. So while diversifying markets may offer Lesotho some breathing space, the United States too may face a backlash, with jeans likely to get more expensive for American consumers. Officials in Lesotho warn that the reprieve from a 50% tariff came too late.
We've been #1 producer of textile to U.S. from Africa under AGOA program. So, yes, President Trump, what he said was basically to free market us. Now the world knows about us. They know that even the T-shirt that he wears is made in Lesotho. So, for me as a manufacturer, it's a bonus, it's a plus.
The tariff storm may have hit hard, but Lesotho's determination to diversify shows that even the smallest nations can strike back. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.